Hello, I'm Louise from Welldoing. To celebrate our 10th anniversary, we're recognising the people, businesses, and organisations that have been a force for good in the area of mental health and well-being in the time since we launched. Today, I'm happy to be talking to Deborah B., who has nominated Emma Colyer of Body and Soul. So, Deborah, first of all, can you tell me why you nominated Body and Soul?
Sure, thank you, Louise. So I have been part of Body and Soul myself for the last, I don't know, 15 years, I think. Starting off just helping out, and now I'm chair of the Board of Trustees, proud to say. And I feel as though Body and Soul have evolved in the last few years, and they started out as a small charity that basically helped people who were dealing with HIV. And they've now expanded into helping far more people, doing work with young people, especially around suicide and family and friends of people dealing with suicide. And the work they do is so astonishing. It's so magical. And I just feel that if more people knew about it and more people were aware of what's available, especially from my point of view, and this is the bit that where it becomes really personal for me. I've got 4 kids. I know how difficult it is when your children start to get anxious, and they're all anxious now. But they start to get anxious, and as a mother, you don't know what to do. You don't know how to help them. You don't know what to suggest for them to do. And I see, whenever I go to Body and Soul and I see the young people there and I see the work that Emma and her team are doing, I'm so gobsmacked. And I just feel that if more people knew about it and more people were aware of the help that's available when they are entirely desperate, whether that's the person who has the anxiety or whether it's the mother who is absorbing that anxiety because that's what mothers do.
Thanks, Deborah. That's great. So, Emma, first of all, to say congratulations on your Welldoing Inspiration Award. Now, I think the first question is, what is Body and Soul, and what's the sort of genesis of it? How did it start?
Kind of following on a bit from Deborah. So we are a UK charity located in London, in Islington, and we're dedicated to transforming the impact of trauma and early relational trauma, so that people can live the lives that they deserve to be able to live. We work with many different issues, but originally we started back in 1996, which is always a bit frightening to think, because then that means I've actually aged from 1996. We started working with children, teenagers, and families affected by HIV. And at that time, in the epidemic of HIV, children, teenagers, and families there was a gap in service provision. So really, that was the start of our journey as a charity. But we always took a very holistic approach, so a whole person approach. And we took an approach of not what's wrong with you, rather what's happened to you. So understanding that, HIV was one part, but many things have happened to someone on their journey to Body and Soul. And I think in terms of our growth, and certainly the issues that we have developed new programs with over the last 10 years, and the transformation of Body and Soul really came from understanding the members who started the organization, and understanding that suicide, for instance, 80% of our population living with HIV had contemplated suicide. In that time, many children and young people had experienced huge amounts of loss and bereavement, and so the care system was also in our psyche. And we kind of knew, and I feel like the board throughout our history, we've always been aspirational and a desire to wanting to help more people, knowing that our model works, our model of care is evidenced and has been shown to work. We have young people who, in fact, this week there was someone that's just starting their doctorate as a clinical psychologist who I knew, who was born in 1996. And you see that, people that often society would say they're not going to be successful and live a flourishing, productive, healthy and happy life. So that's kind of embraces the journey and the move into, and continually is a question to us, you know, can our model help more people? What can we do essentially to bring love, and a lot of what we do is rooted in love, to wider numbers of people, when at a time in the world where we know there's an immense lack of love.
So how do young people find you? The young people who've had traumatic childhoods and so on, how do they find you?
So some, you know, we work across the statutory sector with other NGOs. So for instance, as Deb mentioned, the suicide prevention program, and that's dedicated to 16 to 34-year-olds who have attempted suicide in the last 12 months. They might come through A&E, through university, through crisis teams, through school. So there's wide partnerships in terms of the referrals across a wide spectrum of people. Whereas, say, with adoption, which is another one of our programs, the adoption and special guardianship, that tends to come through social workers, or if people happen to read about us. You know, we've always had a lower profile because I guess we've dedicated our resources and our energy to actually delivering. You know, so something like this award also means that it increases our profile for people to know that where to go for help, because we know that it is possible. There are things that can help and interrupt that root of what often is, you know, suffering, pain, and aloneness.
And is funding, you know, all done through fundraising, or do you get some money from the government or other
So
places?
we have a little bit of statutory funding. Central government funding varies year to year depending what pots are available. We have trusts and foundations, we have corporates, we have a small amount of community fundraising. But I think that, you know, probably for all charities is almost the hardest thing. Like, people often say, wow, you know, the work is intense, and it is intense. You know, you're working with people that are coming to you, particularly with suicide, and holding that responsibility, who want to end their lives and can be very resolute that there is no hope. But that sometimes feels much easier than the constant kind of tread of trying to raise the necessary income where there isn't anything out. For many of the young people that come here, there is no alternative. You know, the waiting lists in the mental health system, they might not meet the thresholds, they go round and round. So we kind of feel that responsibility, and yet the you know, funding is tough going. I was reading, I think there was a report out yesterday around philanthropy giving, and how wonderful it is when an organization has income from, let's say, a philanthropist that just says, get on and do what you would really like to do. Because part of us is like, you're always sort of moving just far enough. And actually it's like, wow, what would it be like if we could really think of expanding, say, the suicide prevention program, or helping more people who have experienced adverse childhood experiences. So yeah, that's that we'd love to be there, I think.
And you know, question for both of you: what do you think the biggest changes have been in the discussion of mental health in the last sort of, you know, I guess you're talking about 30 years or so since this started?
I mean, sadly, in some ways, there are some conversations that haven't changed. I think there's a more, I think mental health is in people's awareness much more now, you know, from things like the ITV, you know, talk campaign, to it's sort of on everyone's radar. But what does that really mean? I suppose that's the question. How do we really understand mental health? We separate it still. And yet, if we understand health, we know our physical health is not separate from our mental health. You know, the biggest brain is in our gut, not in our our brain, as an
Mm.
head brain, and we have a brain in our heart. You know, so understanding it in a more whole system way, I think, is still problematic. We still separate. You know, you go to the mental health department and then you go to your physical bit, but how are they joining together? So that feels like a continual challenge. And maybe there's more hope now in that the conversation is possible. People do want to hear about mental health. People do want to think about well-being, you know.
And what do you think about the stigma that used to be so strong about mental health? Do you think that it's still there? What do you think, Deborah?
I think that we are I feel certainly with people who are my age, who've got children, who are sort of in their late teens and 20s. I think that the conversation has entirely changed, because when our parents were talking about what we were like at that age, we didn't have the same kind of anxieties. It seems as though now all of my friends have got children who may not be children anymore. They may be young people, but they have just as many anxieties. And I'm faced with so many friends saying, I don't know what to do about my child. I don't know where to send them. Or they end up in this, oh, they've got to go to this hospital and then they've got an appointment there, but they've got to wait for 6 months. And then they have 6 sessions with this person. And that's, you know, and they pin all their hopes on that. And then the person's not the right person, which, you know well, Louise, that is a real problem if you don't get the right person. But there are so few choices for parents and young people who are desperately trying to find a solution to their problems, and there just aren't any out there. And it seems to me that people, because they know that I'm part of Body and Soul, they'll say, well, you know, what do they do, and how do we get in contact with them? And you ring up a friend, and I mean, I've had this happen to me twice. I've rung friends and they've said, I'm at A&E and my child is suicidal and they've attempted suicide. That didn't happen to our parents. That didn't happen to that generation. But now we're faced with children who are so anxious and so desperate. So I think, and I just don't see people reacting. You know, the government isn't reacting in the way that we should be reacting. There should be money set aside, because there are so many problems if you don't deal with it upstream. If it's simply left downstream, picking up the pieces, sticking a plaster on and saying, okay, here's six sessions with this person, that should help you. Well, 6 sessions is not going to work, not in that way, probably. So therefore, what's the answer? And from my experience, Body and Soul provides an amazing answer. They are amazing, and they need to get more funding so that more people can have access to them.
Mm-hmm.
That's
so your just to check, Emma, your program would include one-on-one counselling and also group. Do you do group things as well? Right.
I think our model is very much a therapeutic community model. So we understand the importance of community. And if we think about particularly again, think about young people, but all of us, when we feel part of something, that is like a protective factor in our health and well-being. If you're just doing one-to-one therapy, which we do often, we have a wide variety of modalities in terms of one-to-one therapeutic offerings, but it still locates that person with one person, and then they go out to the world. So we really see the importance of bringing one-to-one with group, with creative therapies, with nutritional therapy, with casework. So people, you know, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, thinking about, have you got somewhere safe to live? Can you even have you got food on your table? Because if you're hungry, you know, the idea of therapy is out of the question for many people. They can't, you know, their brain isn't able to think about their trauma. So yeah, we have therapists, we have group therapists. We also have a lot of young people who come through the program who also become part of this, in a sense, the offering, be that peer support in terms of the different programs. There's one young person who joined the suicide prevention program, is now volunteering in one of the therapeutic groups. You know, I saw her yesterday, and she was coming in for supervision with her clinical supervisor. And you know, just you're seeing that, and you knew them a little while ago when they didn't want to be in life. And they access group, they access one-to-one, they access community. We have members of staff who have been through the different programs. And I think there's something about that they also, there's a hope, isn't there, when we see someone who's not necessarily had the same experience but is relatable. It's like, well, maybe it is possible. Maybe I'm not, you know, the one person that nothing's going to work for. That feels an important part of it.
That's great, Emma. Thank you for sharing that example. And then finally, I just wonder what each of you does for your own mental health and well-being.
I'll let you go, Emma. Well, I think,
I mean, I guess when I think about myself, I also think about the wider team. So, for instance, we offer yoga twice a week for the team. So, again, thinking about the physical, the movement, and it being joined up. So, I have consistently for however many years been a yoga person. I think I suppose it's like your individual daily practice. I have a daily practice, you know, in terms of my own kind of alignment and being ready for the day to be with all that is. In terms of, I think if you don't do that and look after yourself, then it's that thing, how can you be there for others?
Exactly.
And I've done my own personal work, and I, you know, it's always a hard balance, isn't it? And I guess people in the world we live in, we talk about life-work balance, but if your work does feel more aligned to your purpose and why you're kind of here on the planet, then it also is a sustaining factor in your well-being.
That's great. Well, it's been lovely talking to you both. And Emma, congratulations. And I hope this will bring more people to know about you and to support you. Okay. Thank you both.
So much, Louise. Thank you. We're really delighted. Thank you.
Great. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.